Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. You'll get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And when I'm not asking Bruce, hey, how big was Batista's? Well, you know. One of the things I like to do is help people save money. And if you're watching this video right now and you're in a 30-year loan, man, you're overpaying your single biggest bill and you may not even realize it. I want you to do a little experiment for me. Take your calculator out, multiply your monthly house payment by 360 payments. That's how many payments there are in a 30-year loan. That big scary number, that's your total of payments. You're looking at that number? You know you can do better. Keep more of your own money right now and go to savewithconrad.com. Or maybe you've got credit card debt. Man, it's not a matter of if I can save you money with that. Your average interest rate on a credit card is more than 20%. And by the way, all the interest you pay on those credit cards, it's not tax deductible. Whereas the mortgage interest, well, that is tax deductible. So if you owe this debt, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the cheapest rate possible and the greatest tax deduction possible? Find out how much money you can save right now for free at savewithconrad.com. You don't need perfect credit. Even scores in the 500s can be approved, and it's no cost out of pocket. But maybe best of all, we're licensed in more than 40 states. We can help more families than ever before. But how much can we save you? Find out right now for free with a quick quote from savewithconrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good, Conrad. Good to see you this morning. You're bright and chipper. Your Dare shirt on. Was that the only one that was clean?
I wore it just for you. It made me think of your chocolate cake.
You got how many black t-shirts you think we both have combined?
Well, like any good wrestling fan, I feel like we probably got at least 20, right?
Yeah.
Various designs and whatnot.
Yeah. It's a black t-shirt day every day. It seems like at a wrestling event. Black is the thing. Those things are good here. I'm in Jacksonville and back in Jacksonville. So life is good. Life on the road is what it is, man. It's just part of the culture of what we do. And so I think everybody's kind of getting back into the swing of things.
Yep.
You know, it's interesting. You know, you take a lot of things for granted in our life in general, but the young guys, a lot of our young guys, have never traveled like this.
Right.
You know, they got spoiled all those weeks in Daly's place in Jacksonville, so consequently, they're just kind of getting the flow now, going into the various cities. And as I understand it, we're on the road every week until December. I think we might be back in Jacksonville somewhere in December, somewhere toward the end of the month. So and that's always a good time because Tony Khan throws a good party.
Oh yeah.
New Year's Eve party. You should come this time. I get you in. I know people.
Listen, I hear that that's becoming one of the AEW traditions. You know, they want to do a Vegas Memorial Day, and they want to do a Chicago Labor Day, and Thanksgiving in Chicago, and
yeah,
now it looks like Jacksonville for New Year's. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, that hasn't been confirmed for Jacksonville. It looks like it's going that direction. So, but it shows that things are coming together. It shows that things are there's a plan, and it shows that there's some sort of symmetry with these schedules, like you mentioned, around these holidays. And a lot of people don't realize that Tony Khan, you know, looks at Chicago kind of like a second home. He's got a home there, as a matter of fact. So it'll be fun to hang. The interesting thing about it is I got to figure out Thanksgiving, unless I meet the girl of my dreams in Chicago, which is somewhat of a long shot at this moment. I think, you know, what do you do that we do TV on Wednesday and the next day is Thanksgiving.
Right.
So what those of us that don't, you know, what do we do? So that's always interesting. I spent one year, the succeeding, like maybe 3 days in Chicago. So there's options, to say the least, but it should be fun. I enjoy the traveling aspect, you know, with not being alone at home, doing my best Macaulay Culkin impersonation. I would say there's plenty of options. So we'll figure out how it works. But anyway, life is good. Life is good. You know, we've had a tumultuous last few weeks with all these deaths that we've encountered, unfortunately, and our recording schedule has not been friendly to those because we're missing them because we'd already recorded a show and so forth. You know it better than me, but I was just shocked at the succession of deaths, and now you know it's like you and me maybe more than you because of my tenure. You know, these guys are passing away that I was close to and had influence. You know, when Joe Hamilton, I said this on social on Twitter, I think it was Joe Hamilton and his partner Tom Ernesto, the Assassins, the Masked Assassins, were they did a traveling program where they would wrestle the Kentuckians. They'd go to the territory. One would come in just a little before the other. They'd renew their rivalry. They'd shoot their big TV angle, and off they would go. And it worked. It really and truly worked. And I can tell you that the promos that Joe did on TV, on local TV, for those events were absolutely frightening for a kid that was 62. I was 10. And it just stayed with me forever. I'm 69 now, and I still remember those promos. I still remember his demeanor. He wasn't a yelling and screaming heel. So that when he did raise his voice or his intensity level, it was very, very significant. But Joe Hamilton was a real PhD. He had it all. Yeah, big man, 300 pounds that could move around, great psychology. And so he was a big influence on my career. And, you know, I didn't know Burt Prentice well. I met Burt with Jerry Lawler several times. He was closer to Lawler than anybody I know because he did a lot of booking with Lawler. But I didn't know Burt very well. But my condolences to his friends and family, certainly. And then we had, who else we have?
Unfortunately,
Oh, Bobby. Oh, God almighty. I think I have a hard time recalling that off the top of my head because I don't want to.
Yeah.
Seriously, I'm not analyzing myself psychologically, but golly, man, it's just he was such a wonderful human being, and he kind of put Huntsville on the map there, Conrad, a little bit because he was always from Huntsville, Alabama. So I love Bobby, I really did. I don't know anybody that didn't love Bobby, quite frankly. I heard a piece on Jim Cornette put out on Twitter, and obviously he was very emotional.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. They've been best friends for
40 years.
Yeah. And I would suggest, I might be wrong, that Corny was probably closer to Bobby than Corny was to family members. You know, he and Bobby and Dennis, he and Bobby and Stan were on the road together, holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, all those things that we hear wrestlers talk about. So it's a terrible loss, and I feel so bad for Bill Dundee and his family. They lost their daughter and their son-in-law in a matter of weeks, and they got, you know, Bobby and Donna had 3 kids, so nobody's talking about those kids and what the impact this had on them. So it's really a shame. But Conrad, comes time for all of us. You know, I've said many times, you know, our tomorrows aren't guaranteed. And this is a great example of exactly how true that statement is.
It's a shame to see, especially in the Eaton case. I mean, golly, those that family just lost Bobby's wife Donna just, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks prior to Bobby passing. But man, you know, Bobby's had some rough health over the last several years, and if there is one good thing to come from all this, he's no longer in pain. He's finally at peace, and he's probably making heaven look good right now too.
Yeah, no doubt. The Alabama Jam lives in heaven, no doubt. I don't know. I think that you know, if there's any good that comes out of this crazy stuff, it's the fact that most wrestlers in companies that are in a organization has some sort of element in it to address health issues.
Yeah.
You know, it's as simple sometimes as taking a blood test. And I think sometimes, and a lot of us, I know the older I get, the more reluctant I am to go to the doctor. And I've got friends that are just the opposite. They want to know everything. And, you know, my mom and dad both died at 64, so I've outlived them 5 years. So I think about that. Your own mortality, you start thinking about the older you get, and you can't help it. It's just it's going to happen. It's a matter of how you handle it, how you process it. But I'm happy the fact that the major wrestling companies have a component now where they can take care of their talent much better. And it starts as just simply a blood test. You know, I've always suggested that, you know, the blood test is going to tell you a lot of things you need to know about your health, your, you know, cholesterol, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then I think they should take a test for sleep apnea. How many wrestlers do you think have undiagnosed sleep apnea?
A lot.
Yeah. And it's eventually going to kill them. That's the end game. It eventually catches up with your ass and it will kill you because your heart just finally taps. So, I know when I was at WWE, we started testing guys for sleep apnea and found a bunch of them that were suffering and they didn't even know it. So I think that that's something that's better for the boys and the girls is health care. But it should have been that way and in place years and years ago. But you avoid all those things to save a couple of bucks. You know, it's all about the money, man. Why do you think WWE started to not legislate, want their product legislated by an athletic commission? Because, you know, they're not a sport, they're a performance art. But still, you look at, you know, I'm thinking if you have a key player, Conrad, on Broadway, for example, then you're going to make sure that that person's covered insurance-wise, key man insurance, whatever it may be.
Sure.
You have a key man.
I get it. It's a wrestling podcast, but he's saving us money on our mortgage. Do you really trust this process? The reviews don't lie. 5-star review after 5-star review. We make it fast, we make it easy, and it's no cost or obligation. Give us a shot to earn your business. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did, especially if you like keeping more of your own money. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket, so what are you waiting for? Hurry to savewithconrad.com.
Policy.
Yes, we do.
See, that's important. It's really important, I think, because you're the straw that stirs the drink, and without Conrad, you know, we're all kind of hobbled.
I'll listen to you.
Well, serious. You know, you created this monster, and so now, and then you get charged of making it better, because we all want to make more money. You want to make more money. We all do. That's just the nature of our beast. That's why we're good at what we do. We're motivated. So, in any event, it's been a sad couple of weeks with these passings, and hopefully they say they come in threes and all that stuff. I just do not want to be included in the next group of 3. You know, I'd just rather
sit
right here, talk to you, you know, hang in there. So, but anyway, we should have, I'm glad that we got a chance to at least say something about those guys. And again, the only reason, folks, we weren't disrespecting them. We were simply timing when we were recording. Some of them, those guys had not, obviously none of those guys had passed.
No.
So now we're just catching up, and I'm glad that we got a chance to do that top of the show, and then we'll brighten it up here as we go through this broadcast. We're doing SummerSlam 1996, Conrad.
That's right.
In a thumbnail sketch for those that are watching and listening to us, what is your main takeaway as to why we're doing SummerSlam 96?
Well, the business is really taken off in 96. You know, we're a couple of months into the Austin 316 era. Bret Hart is about to come back. This is really Vader's first headline pay-per-view with the WWF. It's supposed to be the first of 3 major pay-per-view matches against Shawn Michaels. The Clique has split up. The NWO's on the other channel. Hulk Hogan has turned heel, and the business has had a real shot in the arm. All of a sudden, more folks are watching wrestling than they have in a long time. And the buzz is about the NWO And now, for the first time, it feels like the WWF is trying to play catch up. And a lot of people have said that Vince did his best and the company did their best work when they were sort of with their backs against the wall. They were on their heels. So we're going to break down all the comings and goings and happenings here in the summer of 96. And it's an interesting show to take a look at because you have the context of on the other channel, they're doing that outdoor pay-per-view Hog Wild, and they're going to have the NWO and Hulk Hogan win the world title, spray paint NWO on it. And man, they're off to the races with some really creative storytelling for about the next 18 months. So it's a challenging time where we get to see Vince sort of competing from a defensive position. And I think that's unique and worth a deep dive, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It was a key time of change and evolution, quite frankly. So, going over our script today, I looked at some the names that dot that script that are involved in this event in one form or the other, either from the other side or inside, whatever it may be, is very impressive. And there's some that we had faith in that didn't make it, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. So, in any event, it was good. It's going to be a good show, and because it does talk about a lot of pertinent history, I think.
It's interesting to me too, to think about the idea that, originally the Ultimate Warrior was supposed to be on this show. And of course we know that relationship came to an end, but Sid is going to step in, international incident, which we just broke down. But the idea that that's how it was supposed to go and it doesn't really happen, it makes you wonder, hey, what would that have looked like? So let's jump into it. As you mentioned, it's the 25th anniversary today, August 19th, 1996, the Gund Arena in Cleveland. Cleveland was a WWF town. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
What,
no doubt.
What was your go-to in Cleveland? Did you have a Cleveland routine? Like you've told us before, when we're in Indianapolis, I like to go to this steakhouse. And when we're in Chicago, I like to go to that steakhouse. Did you have a routine in Cleveland?
I can't remember. I oftentimes in Cleveland, especially, hung out with Lawler because that was kind of his town.
Yeah.
Lawler grew up in Berea and a suburb of Cleveland. Of course, he's a noted, well noted
long suffering.
Long suffering. And the baseball team can't even figure out what their name's going to be, seemingly. The Cleveland Guardians just don't doesn't pop it for me.
No, I agree.
I don't get that. But anyhow, I'm sure they'll work it out. It's an example of, see, I'm a Native American, and I never looked at the Cleveland Indians as being offensive. Now, I might be looking at it wrong. And if on further review, I might say, oh, okay, I get your point. I get it. But I'm still not convinced, Conrad, that name needed to be changed. But anyhow, it's like the Redskins. Redskins is a little different deal. It's more slanderous within the framework of the Native American family. So, but anyhow, nowhere in Cleveland. Cleveland's always a good place, good site. We stayed downtown more often than not. So it's somewhat limited to where you're going to eat, but there's plenty of great places to eat in Cleveland. I always enjoy going there. And of course, you mentioned Indianapolis. That's St. Elmo's.
Yep.
And they have the greatest cocktail sauce in the world.
You say that every time. I love it.
I do. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. So, and that's the nice thing about traveling. I always look at what can I do to make my travel better? Well, I can eat well. There's no sense in eating bad food or eating at a slop and chop or whatever it may be. You can always have a good meal. That always reminds me of Bret Hart. Bret Hart was perpetually late for TVs. And I asked him one time, I said, what's the deal in the lateness? Because it doesn't look good. You're the leader. And he said, I like to have a good meal before I go to work. So the good meal. So that's where the good meal with Brett was important, and he had to have a good meal, and that did not include catering. It was another meal, a meal outside, a good meal. So anyhow, crazy stuff, man, crazy stuff. Uh, Cleveland, I like Cleveland though. I've never been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You?
Nope, have not. I've only been to Cleveland one time, I think.
Yeah, it's a nice town.
Yeah.
Nice town. I always enjoyed going there, but nonetheless, we had a hell of a crowd that night in the big house. That was all. That was the front of mind awareness for all of us. We got a hell of a house here. Let's get after it.
Let's talk about some news and notes as we're talking about the WWF here in the summer of '96. We mentioned briefly we're coming off the International Incident pay-per-view that was the prior July. Sid is going to be the last minute replacement for the Ultimate Warrior when that thing goes sideways. As a reminder, Shawn Michaels and Ahmed Johnson would be on his team to lose to Vader, Owen Hart, and Davey Boy Smith. That sets up this show when Vader pins Michaels. We also saw Taker and Mankind brawl after Taker was wrestling Goldust. That's going to set up our Boiler Room brawl. And Steve Austin would pin Mark Marrow in a rematch from King of the Ring. And now we're sort of off to the races. The Monday Night Raw the very next night opens with a rather odd segment where Shawn and Ahmed are supposed to take on the tag champs, the Smoking Guns, but it winds up being a brawl, and the match is rescheduled for the main event later on. In all this, there's a birthday cake for Shawn Michaels, and it's the Fabulous Moolah's birthday being mentioned as well. But somehow, of course, the cake winds up in Sonny's face. I think that's like a law, right? In the bylaws of wrestling. If there is a cake on the program, it's going in someone's face.
Yeah, if there's a cake on the program, somebody's going to wear it.
Yes,
and that was and that we didn't cease to come through on that one. So yeah, I remember that actually. The cake in the face. A lot of things Sonny did was memorable.
Oh, yeah.
She was new in her role. You know, she perfected a new role within the confines of booking. You know, you mentioned Moolah. That's the parallel. So the most prominent women in wrestling for years were Moolah and her girls, and then that changed when Mr. McMahon wanted athletic tens. Sonny, I don't know how athletic Sonny was. She was certainly a 10, but she learned so much with Cornette and Smoky Mountain and being around wrestling and being around Chris Candido, who was a lifelong fan, student of the game. So she had a little one up on some of those guys. And so anyway, that's kind of the parallel. It's an interesting parallel. That's where the business was going. The business was not traveling toward Moolah. It was traveling away from Moolah and to other women, much like Sonny and others. So, and it wasn't about the wrestling, as you could tell. Now, we had some good female wrestlers there that helped those athletic tens, but that just shows you kind of where we were and moving the business forward. It was a time for Sonny and not a time for Moolah.
The other thing happening on this show was we see Stone Cold Steve Austin at ringside for Mark Marrow versus the Goon. And Austin's going to be on commentary, cutting promos on everyone. And talked about how the WWF once dressed someone up in red, white, and blue and put them on a bus driving away, kissing babies, and how the WWF should do that with him so he could whoop everyone's ass. So I loved Austin here getting a moment to really show what he could do.
Yeah.
And this is something that you guys used to do quite a bit back in the day. You bring a wrestler over, you put him on commentary and allow him to do some character work for the audience at home. And Steve Austin, of course, is going to do this and make the most of it. And before you know it, he's the top guy in the business. So I'd say it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out very well. And the fact that Steve always took advantage of his opportunities. You know, you've heard me say here, probably ad nauseum for some, but you got to maximize your minutes. And Steve maximized his minutes. That's a phrase kind of made more popular for young athletes who finally get a chance to get on the field and do a real game. But I use it for wrestling because I think it's very applicable. But Austin always maximized his minutes and took advantage of every opportunity that he had. He never looked at any opportunity as less than. Austin never looked at any opportunity that was like, oh, this is not a big deal. You know, I'll do it, but it's no big deal. Everything was a big deal to him. And that could be a blessing or a curse at times if you're trying to manage him or communicate with him. But yeah, he was ready to go. And I can tell you too, and I think Mark Marrow is one of the finest human beings I've ever known in the wrestling business. But he wasn't Steve Austin's favorite opponent. And I don't know exactly why. I never stopped to analyze or ask, because all you're going to get, he didn't want to work with him. So whatever that reason is, probably can't be corrected by me or you. It's what Steve wanted to do. He didn't think he could have his best matches with Mark. And so whatever it was. But nonetheless, the Austin Marrow thing, was not a match made in booking heaven for whatever reason.
What do you think of the idea of all these, I don't know, enhancement talent? Maybe that's the right word, but we see the goon character. This is very much the era of occupational gimmicks. So you've got Bill Irwin here coming in, and we're going to make him a goon. So it's a hockey player ripoff, and he's got interesting looking wrestling boots that mimic skates. What'd you think of this creative?
Well, all it was enhanced to do was the guys that we brought in, like Bill Irwin, they weren't going to get over. They were not brought in to get over to be a main event guy. They were brought in to help some of the younger guys that were trying to develop and evolve, people in new roles. And that's kind of why those guys brought in, Tracy Smothers was another one, the toilet guy, Hopper. That was what they were there for. They were there to put on the card. We were doing house shows. They had a chance to go work out. They worked 10, 15 minutes at a house show with a greener talent. You can't get better working with people that are your skill set or less. It can't happen. It's not going to happen. So that's why those guys came in. They weren't brought in to be stars, but we wanted to give them some credence and some credibility because we knew that their wrestling skills were excellent.
Right.
And they were excellent. So that was the reason for that.
Speaking of these new gimmicks, the show ends with Ron Simmons debuting as Farouk Assad. He's going to jump Ahmed Johnson to start a feud with Ahmed, but of course gets hurt in the angle. And this is a talent that it felt like you guys have been after for a long time. And of course you'd worked with Ron for years prior to this. How excited were you to see Ron finally make his debut, and then frustrated when he's immediately injured?
Well, I was always a big Ron Simmons fan, and part of that is football.
Yeah.
The late Bobby Bowden, God rest his soul, who just passed away here recently, he was effusive on his praise of Ron Simmons. Barry Switzer, another pretty good football guy, said, unless we can figure a way to block Ron Simmons in the Orange Bowl, two of them back to back, we can't win. That's how key a player Ron Simmons was to the Florida State program. He was all everything. And I just got along with him really well. He was straightforward. He's like most wrestlers. He didn't trust many people, and most wrestlers don't.
Right.
So I just always had a lot of respect for Ron, still do. So we were high on him. It's just head scratching that how some of these creative things came about. Ron's a black man, so he's got to have a new name. He's got to be, it's got to be changed to, Ahmad or Ahmed or whatever the hell.
Farouk Assad. What a weird name.
Whatever. So, and we went along, what do you do? You're an announcer. You go with what's on the paper.
Right.
So, yeah, but I'm glad we got Ronnie. He's a good hand. He's in the Hall of Fame. He was a rock, no doubt, not the rock. He was a rock firm, strong foundation piece. So I had a lot of time for Ron Simmons, still do.
And of course he's immediately in that angle with Ahmed. And as we said, Ahmed gets hurt, and Farouk's going to live to fight another day, and thankfully eventually drop that stupid blue helmet. Pat Patterson is a part of the agents and crew that come down to break up this skirmish with Ahmed and Farouk, and it's really the first time we'd seen Pat on TV in a while. Was Pat playing hokey pokey with the company at this point? I know he's had more retirements than Terry Funk.
I don't think so. I just think that, I think at one point Vince thought everybody that was on TV should be a character at some level.
I see.
And Pat was there to lay out matches and coach guys along. He was so instrumental in the careers of so many talents, especially Dwayne Johnson. So, but Pat was Shawn Michaels. Pat babysat, worked on his angles, worked on his matches. So, but Pat did a phenomenal job there. He was a key player, without question. And so then he started getting more involved, and of course, that evolved rather into Patterson and Briscoe becoming stooges,
right?
Which is a new term for a lot. It wasn't like Mo, Larry, and Curly, and Pat and Jerry. It was a wrestling stooge, so it was a little different. But yeah, Pat was instrumental. He was a big time player.
I think Bruce would have been a good stooge.
Oh yeah, he is now, right?
The gate of this show in Seattle is the largest ever for a Raw taping. This, of course, at the time, but $91,092. And I guess there's a misconception that the WWF was really struggling in 96, 97, but the gate numbers don't always reflect that. I think it's just the perception of fans at home because, well, WCW's creative is on fire with the NWO. And as a result, they're more often than not winning the ratings war. But the business of the WWF outside of the ratings comparison was not bad. Is that something that you would sort of beat the drum around the office, sort of saying, hey guys, let's focus on our business, not necessarily what everyone else is doing?
I focused on what's next.
Yeah.
What's next? I saw a press conference one time from Nick Saban, and he's getting questioned after a game press conference thing. And their next game was against Tennessee. And he kept saying, we're on to Tennessee. Another question, we're on to Tennessee. And they were talking about opponents down the road.
Yeah.
How are you gonna match up with Auburn? It looks like they're coming into their own, blah, blah, blah. We're on to Tennessee.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I did. I just believe that we're on to Tennessee and we're on to the next thing. And that's what you should be thinking about is your performance and maximizing your minutes the next time you're booked on television. So that's kind of where I was. I think the boys probably had more dialogue about that than I did. I'll be honest with you, Conrad, I didn't have time to dwell on it.
Sure.
You're doing payroll. I'm booking the live, helping book the cards and live events. And at this point in time, I was working with JJ. JJ was still there, I think, in 96, right?
Yeah, I think he's going to wind up leaving in 96. I'm not exactly sure when, but I think by this point he might have been gone, but just barely. Yeah, and of course, we've talked about before that represented opportunity. And well, our old pal Bruce took a stab at it for a minute and then decided maybe talent relations was not exactly his bag, baby. I think he preferred creative instead.
He did. Yeah, he was better at it.
Yeah.
Bruce is really good at creative. And that was his passion. And paperwork and contracts and minutia, which was the perception of some, just wasn't his deal. And so when Vince saw that, I think Vince even foresaw that because he created a new title for me, which I didn't ask for, but it came with a little bit more extra cheese in my Whopper, so I like that.
Oh yeah.
That always is a good motivator for anybody. But he found his niche, and I, as I understand his role now, he's kind of doing that. He's working a lot in creative and administration of that creative. So he's in a good spot now, I think, and does a good job. I was bullshit a while ago about him being a stooge.
Oh, we're all
stooges,
of course.
So
Tony Schiavone's the biggest of them all. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the bill for SummerSlam. there's not a lot of Vader Shawn Michaels interaction. It's really built around Jim Cornette's promos. Do you think Vader was ready for Shawn Michaels in the headline a major WWF show, or is Cornette such a good speaker that, I mean, you just be foolish not to focus on him?
Oh yeah, Leon was ready. Vader was ready. There's no doubt. He's a veteran. He'd worked headline big cards primarily in Japan. Didn't have the great long-term run in America until he got with WCW and with then WWE. But yeah, he was ready as in ring ready. Absolutely. Leon could be a little rough around the edges because Leon was used to doing things the way he wanted to do them. Shawn Michaels is used to doing things he wanted to do. So you got a little butting of the heads there. And because Shawn was so connected politically with Vince, Shawn normally won out those debates, those arguments, those philosophical discussions, whatever it may be. But yeah, Leon physically and mentally, Leon was ready for anybody, any match. I think we had a chance there to make this long-term monster heel that you could really get if you think back at it, Conrad, how good would it have been for a red hot Vader to be the champion and he be the guy that anoints Austin?
Right.
Could have been interesting. Been a match I wanted to see, quite frankly, as a fan. So, but yeah, Leon was ready. Leon and Shawn both had issues getting along with people socially. And I don't know why those reasons are there. It's based on insecurity, based on paranoia. And, Shawn was very independent and could be very contentious, quite frankly. But yeah, as far as Leon being ready for the match, hell yeah, absolutely.
Undertaker and Austin are going to main event the second Raw on the path to SummerSlam, and Austin gets the win by DQ when Mankind interferes. This, of course, is all to build up that Boiler Room Brawl. Who do you think deserves the credit for being the brains behind the brawl, if you will, to adding the Boiler Room concept to the slate at SummerSlam?
Well, I'm sure that Taker and Mick Foley both had a lot to do with creating that match, because something had to be created in that unique area that both talents would sign off on. So I would say, without knowing explicitly who, I would think it'd probably be a combination of Mick and Undertaker. And then Vince takes a germ of an idea that the talent seemed to like, and then he refines it, expands upon it. And I was very leery that Boiler Room Brawl was going to come off as good as it did because of the environment. You're surrounded by steel and concrete. You're not trained to be a wrestler in this environment. But those guys have been two great pros and liking to work with each other. I thought pulled it off famously.
Let's talk about Brian Pillman. He's going to debut a new Time Bomb segment. This is a more modern version of the old Piper's Pit, but it doesn't last very long. Was it the inability to really get Pillman to stay on point, or is it because Pillman needed additional surgeries and couldn't keep going? Or was it all just designed to be blown off with this Steve Austin ankle in the chair thing, as best you recall?
It's hard to remember that. Certainly Brian his interview segments I thought were entertaining.
Yeah.
They were unpredictable. And that may have been scary at some point in time, especially doing live television. Because, we didn't know what was going to motivate Brian and what he was going to say and so forth. But I don't know if there was really a long-term plan there. We were always dealing with Brian's injuries and his health. And that makes you have not the peaceful, easy feeling that my band, the Eagles, would sing about. You just didn't know.
Right.
I think that's kind of where we were there, to take it small steps at a time. But Brian was certainly going to be utilized to get Austin over. And they had great natural chemistry. There's a story there. There's a backstory there. They liked each other. They liked to work together. So in a lot of ways, it made perfect sense.
We got Crush, Brian Adams here. He's going to return as part of Clarence Mason's stable of soon-to-be wrestlers that really never takes off. What was it about Adams that made the company take another chance on him after his steroid and drug convictions years prior? Is it his relationship with Taker or Vince, or what was it?
Well, Vince and Taker both really liked Brian, and but let's not forget Brian was what Vince looked for.
Yeah.
He was 6'5", 6'6", a lean 280, 300, very athletic. I think Brian's issue was that even though he had that massive frame, he didn't have a V8 brain. V8 meaning he wasn't a 4-cylinder. He might have been a 4-cylinder as far as passion is concerned, but he relied so much on his size and his athleticism, and we couldn't figure out how to push him. Bruce was friends with him too. We didn't find the combination to get him to get to the next level, and that was frustrating at times because he had everything that you would need. He just didn't have the motivation to get to that level. I'm sure Taker had plenty of talks with him. They were good buddies. They traveled together, et cetera, et cetera. So you know that Brian's going to get the next look simply because Taker liked him. And if Taker liked you, that means you get a match with him or 2 or 10, whatever it may be. So that was Brian's issue. I just never didn't know what the formula was to unlock his motivational brain to get him to be. Because I've seen in spurts where he was jaw-droppingly good, but there's just no consistency.
We've got talk of the Iron Sheik coming back as a manager, and we do see him make some appearances here and there with the Sultan. Is the Iron Sheik just somebody that Vince had a soft spot for?
Maybe I could see that being an accurate answer. But you know, anytime Cosgrove was on TV, he got heat. It's still that old anti-American thing. It still sells tickets this very day if you wanted to play that card. But Sheik was a lovable character. Like everybody, he's funny, and he was getting another chance to make some paydays. And so I think that's what that was. But he was a natural heat getter, and we needed that. We need people making emotional investment to see Cosgrove get beat up, which is a great mark of any wonderful heel. So I think it had a little bit of a nostalgia feel to it. Give the guy a second chance. And Patterson had a lot to do with those type things because being one of the boys and wrestling had an amazing career. Pat did. And so he would go out of his way to find spots where guys would fit in a perfect world. So I kind of think it had a lot of sentimental attachment to it because Cosgrove was very well liked. People liked being around him, and he was fun. And you know, he needed a break. I think he had lost a daughter somewhere along there, you know. And so, but he was a good dude. I still think the world of Cosgrove. I first met Cosgrove in my little department store in Westville, Oklahoma. He was alongside Danny Hodge, and it's like standing next to Secretariat and some other famous horse you could think of. And he weighed about $190, lean, just chiseled. And he traveled with Hodge. And of course, they never got accosted by fans because the fans would have been killed. But I always liked Cosgrove. Goes all the way back to the 70s.
Let's talk about another guy coming in. Kevin Kelly is going to debut on TV, and I think he's primarily working with you. What about Kevin made him successful early on? It feels like he just took to this like a duck to water or fish to water, as they say.
I think Billy Gunn was a guy that kind of he was friends with Kevin in Florida. I think that Kevin had nice preparation for the job in his previous works, but he was a student of the game. He was like you and me, he was a fan forever, and always loved the business and wanted to be a part of it somehow. Yeah. Knowing as I knew, and I know now that I'm not ever going to be in the ring as a performer. I was a few times, but it wasn't by my own means. Just the way it worked out. Kevin was prepared. He was passionate. I enjoyed working with him. He took coaching well. I know he got off the wrong foot when he wanted Kevin Foote's his real name, no pun intended. I remember he had an issue with how his TV name was going to be spelled. And I don't remember the exact details. It was one of the two things. It was either he wanted his name spelled Kelley or Kellly, one of the two. And he went all the way to Kevin Dunn on that deal. And I told him, I said, that's a wrong hill to die on. What the hell do you care about how they spell your fucking last name? Don't cause any consternation over something like that. Don't ever give, I tell guys this all the time. Don't give any company a reason to not want to work with you. And what you're doing right now is giving them a reason, if you ever stub your toe, to not want to work with you. But Kevin was good for the job, and he worked hard, and he was very prepared always, just like he is now with his New Japan stuff. So I'm always been a big fan of Kevin's. We did some work since then, obviously. I think we did a New Japan show or something. But I enjoyed working with Kevin. Thought he did a good job. He wasn't a heel. He wasn't a Lawler. He wasn't a Heyman. He wasn't a Heenan. He was different. And if he had, I think the plan was eventually just to have him do a show, whether it be SmackDown or the second hour of Raw or whatever. Hell, I don't know. But he had a shot there, and unfortunately, it just didn't work out. But he's a good hand, no doubt about it.
We should mention Mark Henry is also announced in this era as being signed to a 10-year, multi-million-dollar agreement with the WWF. Man, what was it about Mark Henry that Vince McMahon felt was so bankable here? Is it just the idea that he had the athleticism that at 400 pounds or whatever, he could dunk a basketball? Or did he really feel like, hey, this is our chance to finally have a Olympic gold medalist on the roster? What did he see in Mark to offer such a big long-term deal?
Well, I think all those things played into it. I saw Mark dunk the basketball at the NBA All-Star game. I think it was in Arizona. I might be wrong on that one, but he was at that size, could dunk a basketball was pretty damn impressive. Showed great athleticism, and for a guy that was, as you said, 400 pounds, somewhere thereabouts. The fact that Mark was African American didn't help hurt anything. We want to become more diversified. So you got an athletic, supremely athletic African American that we felt like over the long haul was going to be a great investment. We never stopped thinking that. It was challenged from time to time, but we got him the right coach. It's a matter of getting the right coaches, right teachers. And I know we sent him to Calgary. He worked out with Leo Burke and I think some of the Harts. We got him good coaching. And then Mark started grasping the nuances of wrestling. And if you listen to him now on Busted Open or wherever it may be on AEW Rampage, you can tell Mark has evolved into a real true student of the game. And he does a great job for AEW with talking to a lot of the young kids. He sits in a group with them during the shows and point out things and let them come asking questions. He's a very valuable asset for AEW, which a lot of folks may not realize because he's not on TV all the time. He will be now in some role with Rampage, but in any event, Mark was a long-term investment. He was a project, but you can't replace Mark Henry's Conrad. I mean, God Almighty, look at him. So he was special. He was an Olympian, and over time he has evolved into one of the most beloved characters in the business.
Let's mention Ahmed Johnson is going to win a battle royal to earn a WWF title shot the night after SummerSlam, but the injury he sustained at the hands of Farouk, aka Ron Simmons, is going to prevent that from happening. And that probably gives away the proposed Ahmed versus Farouk match at SummerSlam for the Intercontinental title. We've talked about Ahmed Johnson probably more than ever before earlier this summer, so we'll just keep it moving for now. But I do want to mention, because something that happened back then, I don't think happens these days unless it's maybe a marathon for YouTube like Elevation or Dark, but that's a different thing. When you tape this many shows the same day, don't you open yourself up to perhaps guys getting injured a little easier? I mean, there's the whole adrenaline rush. You got to get ready, and then you got to cool down, and then you got to go do it again. And obviously there's going to be audience fatigue and things like that, but the performers themselves, that's probably a case for those guys as well, right?
Well, it shouldn't be if they're in shape. You're asked to go out and work 8 or 10 minutes. If they were doing a series of marathon matches or whatever, Ironman matches, it might be Conrad. But I don't buy the fact that they're tired. So they're more prone to have make a mistake. The deal with Ahmed, we've talked about this, and I'm not going to start on a tangent now, but he wasn't very good. He had a great look, but he wasn't fundamentally sound enough for the role that we had envisioned him in. And so that's how I look at that deal. Fatigue, no, come on. So, but he had to work with an athlete much better than he to improve. And then you have to want to improve and listen to those who are trying to coach you up. And I don't know that was always his case.
We've got a clip shown here of Mr. Perfect interviewing Bret Hart on the Wrestle Vessel regarding Bret's current contract situation. And then he's asking, when will we know the answer? First off, give us some good Wrestle Vessel stories. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about that. The WWF Cruise.
Yeah. Well, I remember my lovely little Jan was with me. That's the best thing about the cruise. Other than, like seeing a lot of people gambling in games that they didn't have a clue how to win. Going back to the bank, so to speak, and withdrawing money. Trying to drink all the booze on the I remember Dustin Rhodes was drinking some sweet drink with a little umbrella in it and all that stuff. And he said, "God damn, man, I can't take my lips off of it. I can't take my lips off of it." Well, so that was a basic thing. It was indulgence. And then getting guys and they're getting at their autograph thing on time was another chore. They didn't realize you're here to work. It's just a unique environment that you're going to work in. But it seemed like everybody had a pretty good time on it. I remember I'm in the pool and Owen Hart pulls my frigging bathing suit down to my ankles, and little Jimmy got exposed, and felt like George Costanza, shrinkage. But that was Owen. I loved him. It was embarrassing a rib, but one that was well respected and appreciated at the end of the day. So I don't think anything too dastardly happened. I don't remember any major incidents on it, and it could have been because all it was excessive drinking constantly, all day, every day, all night. And the cruise was just the scene of the crime. It seemed like everybody had a pretty good time, Conrad. I got a picture out here in my hallway of the group. It's just funny. Someday I'll get it to you, and you can look at it. It might be a fun picture but you see different body language that people had, and it told a story. If you knew the personalities and where they were mind-wise, mindset, you could get it. For example, Bret was sitting on the front row, kind of extended away from everybody with a unique distance. I remember that picture. Jan sitting next to Tammy Stitch, Sonny. I'm sitting in the middle of the front row, and Austin's there, and all of our talent. Those are happy pictures for me because Janet had a great time. She had a blast on this. If she was here now, she'd tell you, "Oh, I had a great time," and she did. but it was an interesting experience. And Chris Jericho's taken that lead, Conrad, and is he's monetizing that concept. And I went on the first, I think I went on the first Jericho cruise and had a phenomenal time. It's very well done, very well organized, and Chris has got a great team around him. This is what they do. They do these celebrity cruises, and it worked out really well. So the Jericho cruise, I maybe already sold out, but nonetheless, it's a good project and an idea. I think we did where do we do the? Oh, in WCW we did the Bruise cruise.
That's right.
And I was on that as well. So, but nonetheless, it was, I think, all fun stuff. It was good time. Good time was had by all. I've always said, Conrad, my fat looks better brown than white. So we accomplished that goal. So all good.
Let's talk about some behind the scenes controversy. This is the August 5th edition of the Wrestling Observer. Quote, there is, or at least was, tremendous heat on Jim Cornette coming off the weekend tour, largely due to a backstage argument he had with Shawn Michaels after the match in Anaheim. Apparently, they had worked out a spot where Michaels was going to super kick Cornette, but Cornette either tripped or fell down, and Michaels super kicked Air, or I guess Michaels felt Cornette double crossed him on the spot. There were problems already between the two, stemming from something that apparently happened after the show in San Francisco. Anyway, after they went behind the curtain in Anaheim, Michaels immediately began yelling at Cornette about the spot, and Cornette began yelling back, and it became a big deal internally. I don't think you were at this show, but what do you remember hearing about this?
Just a unnecessary pissing contest. Cornette stood his ground, and Shawn looked to use his influence and where he was on the card and how he was perceived in the office, primarily by the chairman, as his trump card. So, but unnecessary. They blew their steam off, and hopefully, my role or my 2 cents in that was to get it out of their system. That's no Bill Watts thing. It's like when Nord the Barbarian and Butch Reed got in a fight in Oklahoma City in the Sunday afternoon matinee. That's redundant, isn't it? On the Sunday afternoon show. And then they drove to Tulsa to do TV that night, faces all puffy and black eyes and so forth. And he made them fight again because he wanted to make sure he got out of their system. I think what he really wanted to do was see a good fight because he missed the original fight because he wasn't in Oklahoma City. So that's kind of the deal. Did they get out of their system? It seemed like they did, but Shawn was in a tough time, and right then we all start making excuses for him. Well, it was this. It was he was on too much medication. He was drinking too much. He was influenced by the wrong people. Somewhere along the goddamn way, Conrad.
Yeah.
We had to stop and look in the mirror. And Shawn's made a great life changes since that time, by 180 degrees, which is wonderful. But he was not so easy to be around. He just was so frigging good. He was in that Flair conversation. When you say who's the best two workers you ever saw, the old school guys will say, well, Ray Stevens, some of those cats, and I don't know, make an argument about that. But Shawn at that time was as good as anybody lacing boots, and he used that cachet to his advantage.
We should talk about Cornette here for a minute. It feels like, and I don't know, but it feels like around this era, maybe he started to tire of the WWF or the travel or living in Connecticut. And then eventually, of course, he's going to say, hey, let me go do something else. And thankfully, developmental becomes the thing. Is this really the first time you thought, man, Corny might not be having the best time?
No, it wasn't the first time. I knew that he was challenged. Living in Connecticut could be challenging. It's expensive. You have to be prepared for the weather and the ice and sleet, travel, the traffic, and blah, blah, blah. And so Corny wasn't having fun. And there was too many channels to go through. He was used to being an autonomous booker where he had an idea. Well, that idea is how it played out. And that was not the case in WWE. You had a lot of channels to go through. You know, first of all, Vince had to improve it. He had to make, you know, he had to bless it. Then you have Bruce there, a filter, Pat, a filter, me to a lesser degree, a filter. And so it was tough for him. But I knew that that his time there was not long term. In other words, my advice to him would have been, I hope you're renting. Don't buy any real estate here.
Yeah.
Rent. And, you know.
I bet JJ wishes somebody would have told him that.
Yeah. I felt bad about that. Bruce and I were doing the show. We're running the show in South Africa when JJ bailed. And it was the same week that Shane McMahon and his lovely wife got married.
Yeah. And Vince thought the worst, right? And thought that maybe JJ was going to try to take it to the paper or Mushnick or something and ruin the big weekend. And of course that didn't happen. He was just going to WCW. Yeah.
And he got his pay cut, and he had a big nut to fill. He had a special needs child, and he had other young children. And so, you know, and I think the world of JJ to this very day, but he just couldn't do it anymore, Conrad. He hit the wall. And that's how he reacted. I don't know that was the best solution, but it was the solution that JJ felt at that time was the best for him. Quite frankly, that's not really all that matters. But Bruce and I were in, I remember Bruce going, these eyes are big, and he says, "You'll never believe what happened." What? You'll never believe it. I said, well, tell me, and I might believe it.
Right.
You know, JJ quit. He had a blow up events, and he walked out, he quit. And so, you know, I could see Bruce's wheels turning because Bruce wanted that job. And I was really cool in my position. I didn't need the title. Over time, I got to where I took ownership of it, maybe too much. But it was startling news because we all figured that JJ was there for life, Conrad. He had his routine. He had his procedures he did. He was very well organized. I learned a lot from JJ. Being organized, taking calls from the talent as quickly as you can. Hopefully when they're on the line, not when you have to call them back. Nobody likes to be called back. And especially now, you ever send a text message? You probably send them to me sometimes, and I forget I have them.
Oh yeah.
And you know, you want to record Monday morning? Nothing. And I see it. Oh yeah, I should tell Conrad I'm good. So, but that was the deal. We thought we thought JJ was a lifer, going to be there forever. That was a big deal for us, for him to leave, because we had to go try to take all the paperwork and everything he was executing, the contracts, et cetera, and you know, we had to go through all that stuff. And I think there's where Bruce started to discover this might not be the gig for me. Now JR, he don't mind this deal. It's kind of what he likes. So Vince made two jobs. Bruce is vice president of talent relations, and I was vice president of wrestling business or something like that, something ridiculous. And so until it all worked out and leveled out to where Bruce is just going to primarily focus on creative, which is good management by Vince, because that you always try to do, Conrad. You do it every day, I'm sure. Yeah. If you don't, you should. People should be put in the positions so that they can succeed. They shouldn't be put in positions where there's going to be a stretch or I don't know if they can make that. So Vince is smart in that regard, among other things, a lot of things. But he saw our strengths and he put us in our position to execute what our strengths were.
I think I had my timeline messed up. JJ leaves the next month. He leaves September of '96 when you guys are over in South Africa.
Okay.
I do want to ask though, because you and I've never really spent any time talking about this from JJ's perspective, and he wrote about this in his book. He had a younger wife.
Yeah.
And
Lindsay was her name. Nice lady.
Vince wanted him to buy a house. So he bought a house, and Vince helped him out with some financing where he needed a little help to get the loan, with not only Vince's banker friend, but an additional loan from Vince in the company, and he would pay that back. So now he's sort of leveraged to the hilt on this new beautiful home in Connecticut, but he's got a home. He's got roots now with the WWF. And then, as you mentioned, he got his pay cut. And I think JJ took it personally, as a lot of people would, I'm sure, that when those pay cuts came down, allegedly they only went to the quote unquote wrestling people. So
Right.
people who had a wrestling background saw their income cut by nearly 50%. People who weren't wrestling people did not enjoy such a cut. But now he's left struggling to pay for a house that he could barely afford on a full income. And now he's got a half income, and it's just a mess. So, I understand when you said, well, maybe JJ shouldn't have handled his business that way, but I can't help but know that story and think, shit, if I was JJ, I'd be looking for somewhere to go too.
Yeah. But he was burned out,
Yeah.
Conrad. No, the workload and the responsibilities and, having to handle talent issues. It seemed like, I talked to JJ. I said, do you ever go talk to Vince about good news? Is there everything good that you've got to share with him? And he said, yeah, that's a good point. It's always about this guy's late. This guy didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
This guy didn't want to put so-and-so over, and I had a whole different mindset on how to handle that. You solve their problem or you eliminate it.
Yes.
It's easy. I don't want to run 22 power, coach. Okay, you sit your ass down.
Yeah.
If somebody's coming in that wants to run 22 power, I promise your ass. So I think I got cut. I think I got a $30,000 hit on my salary, 30 G's. And Jan said, what are we going to do? I said, well, we're not living above our means. We're comfortable. She was working. She was a flight attendant. I said, so we'll just make it. We'll just readjust our budget and spend less. That means you can't buy as many Louis Vuitton bags, honey, as you normally do.
Right.
So, but I remember the 30 grand hit. I think Bruce got hit 30 grand too.
Yeah. Lots of pay cuts around, but not for Barry Windham. He's coming in and he's going to become the stalker. Boy, Barry Windham, 10 years prior to this, 1986, probably one of, if not the best wrestler in the world, not named Ric Flair. Now he's coming in here, and well, it's a different Barry. Fair to say?
Absolutely fair to say. We're trying to regenerate a different era in that era, and the ship has sailed. And I'm with you. I got to call some NWA matches for Crockett that Barry was involved in. They were as good as I've seen, good as I ever called.
Yeah.
He was a natural. I know that term's bandied around and thrown around easily, but when he was on, when Barry Windham was on, there was nobody better. Big athletic 6'5", 6'6" guy, grew up in the business, as we all know. He just had a feel for it. So, but unfortunately, our intentions were good. We all wanted to see that Barry that we knew, but for whatever reason, it was time to readjust, and unfortunately, it didn't work out for him.
Let's talk about Ron and Don Harris. They're in talks to be coming back here to the promotion as well. Of course, previously we saw them as the Bruise Brothers. Why don't you think it worked out for them their first go around with the company?
Well, they were booked kind of uniquely. They weren't given that monster heel push of two twin brothers that were big, monstrous guys. I thought the booking was a little anemic. Not their fault.
Yeah.
But I think the booking was a little anemic and it was a little weak. But they're good guys. They were very, they quietly became two of the more popular guys in the locker room because the boys knew that they're men's men. They always had their back. I know they had a little altercation or had some words of Shawn Michaels at one point in time that, they showed their defiance because they knew that they're going to automatically be on Vince's shit list for, confronting Shawn on whatever it may be. So, I remember, I think it was a garden or somewhere where they shut the door in the locker room and had a one-on-one with him and, express themselves, shall we say. It's just, we had to fix the synergy in the locker room was a huge thing for talent relations. We got to get off this me against the world, and I got all the stroke, and I'm not doing that, and I'm not doing this, I'm not. Just too damn negative.
Yeah.
And so we tried to fix that, and over time, the fix is going to be guys that were that had a different attitude. They were hungry and were willing to go the extra mile to ensure their success. We talked about Austin earlier. He never missed an opportunity that he didn't embrace. Never approached a challenge that he didn't want to meet. So that's kind of where we were with that. I just don't think that Ron and Don were, I like what they did. They're a solid team. Were they a great team? I don't know if they were a great team, but they're a good team, and they look good in an 8x10. They look good coming to the ring. They're smart guys. Both of them. They've had success outside of their in-ring wrestling career since they've been away.
Oh yeah.
So I was always a favor of those guys. They were always nice to me. They're polite. They respected the coaching, and so they deserved better than they got. But the booking didn't do them any favors.
Another person I want to mention is Dr. Death, Steve Williams. He debuts here, but in ECW. Would you have been involved in that at all? Getting him on the phone with your old pal Paul Heyman?
No, I wasn't. Paul knew Doc he didn't know him as well as I did, because I was around when he got signed by the Cowboy between his junior and senior year at Oklahoma University. So he was on the football team, had already been to 3 bowl games. He's already a 3-time All-American wrestler when Cowboy signed him, which I always found to be kind of interesting. I think that's kind of where Vince's pulling the curtain back thing really helped, because as a amateur athlete, getting paid was sketchy until you pull that little onion back. It's okay. This is showbiz. He's a performer. This is not a sport. So he's not being paid for and he's not doing what he does on a collegiate mat. Whole different presentation. So Paul was aware of Doc, and Paul and my friendship, was shared with Doc. Doc knew Paul well. So I didn't have anything to do with it, but it was a good move for Doc to get some American bookings, because he was kind of one-dimensional in a sense that he was only doing, his big money was being earned in Japan. And I know, like a lot of guys, they love Japan because the pay's good,
sure,
and all that stuff. But still, they all wish they had an American base to some degree. See your kids more, see your wife more, or your baby's mama, wife, whatever the case may be. But that was a good move for Doc, I think, to go there, because Paul was a good mentor. Paul did well with Austin, because all he basically did was kind of what Tony Khan's doing now, Conrad. He let the talents create their own persona.
Yep.
And how important is that? We've seen that in AEW, where our success has been the fact that a lot of our guys have a hand in their own creative. And once you do that, you're really invested in your angle or your persona or the match or whatever it may be. So it's a smart thing. So I thought Doc going to ECW was not a bad thing, because I knew that Paul could help Doc with his verbal skills, which are always his weakness.
Let's talk about what's next. Here we are. The SummerSlam card is together, and it's time for the free-for-all. And Steve Austin is fresh off of becoming king of the ring and coining that famous phrase, Austin 316. And on the pre-show, they do a rather interesting little skit here. Let's just jump to it, I guess, and we'll come back to some other news and notes leading into the show. But the creative is Yoko's going to go to set up the big bonsai drop, and he's going to, with his extra weight, because he's heavier than ever at this moment, pull the top turnbuckle off. So instead of just using it to pull himself up and bounce up and down comes the bonsai drop, The turnbuckle gives way, the rope breaks, he falls backwards. Austin gets him with the, I think you call it, let's sneak one. So he gets the quick pin.
A steel one.
Steel one. There you go. But the concept is, Yokozuna is heavier than ever. And I know that that's been something you guys have discussed a lot when you were trying to get him to go to the Mayo Clinic and Duke and all these other examples where you guys were trying whatever you could to help this fella get the weight under control. What do you remember about the creative here? And ultimately, one of the biggest stars in the business is going to wind up being on the pre-show.
Well, it's ironic how that worked out. Obviously, I can't tell you I was wild about it. But it got Austin on the TV and it got Yoko on the television. It added a little bit of sizzle to the pre-show, and we're using the pre-show like an infomercial. It's free for people to watch. So seeing Austin on there and seeing the crowd and all that stuff, emotionally invest, so forth, I thought was pretty good. But having a what was it segment? 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
Yeah, it was real fast.
Yeah, it was. They weren't out there long enough to make it stink too bad. They weren't out there long enough to make it great, but they're out there long enough to sell some pay-per-views. I think that was the whole deal there. But you're right about Yoko. We were very concerned about Yoko's weight, and it was not just the fact that he couldn't execute or wouldn't execute. It was the fact that his long-term health was the issue of this. That's what that was. He's becoming. I had a doctor tell me one time. I said, you got to take charge of this thing because he's morbidly obese.
Yeah.
That scared, when I heard that description, it scared the shit out of me. Because I just knew that somewhere along the way, we're going to get a phone call that Yokozuna, much like Andre, was found dead in his hotel room. And, we're not prophesizing it, didn't want it to happen, but it seemed like it was inevitable. So, I wasn't crazy about it, but I understand why it was done. And not knowing at the time how big Austin was going to get, kind of solidified the rationale behind it.
Yeah. I mean, to give clarity or my opinion of what you just said, if you know that you've got a guy who's hot, why not put him on the pre-show and help you sell some pay-per-views? And it is a hot angle. It is an interesting looking way of, it's not something people had seen before. It wasn't overexposed. It felt new. It felt fresh. And yeah, here's this big star. I mean, he's getting everybody's attention. So it feels like a home run.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, they weren't out there long enough to kill it. They weren't out there long enough to make it great. They were out there long enough to get the exposure and to create some buzz about that night's pay-per-view.
I want to mention too, Jake Roberts comes back to the company after going AWOL briefly, and Jerry Lawler was slamming him for being an alcoholic on all the syndicated shows. To the best of your recollection, did Jake have any issues with this creative, or did you view this and did he view this as maybe some form of punishment for him disappearing before the International Incident Show?
Oh, I think he probably was uncomfortable with it because it just exposed what the issues that he was having. He's an old time guy. He's an old timer. He's a old school fella. So if it was going to help him draw money and stay on the card and move up the card, then so be it. He's getting tagged back in the game. He's back in the match, so to speak. So he may have had some issues, Conrad, softly said, but he had to realize also that it was primarily because of his lifestyle.
Right.
And hopefully that the idea was, well, maybe he'll realize that we all know he's got these issues. We want to fix them. We want to help him because we felt like that if nothing else from a talking perspective, that he could still help us. And again, I think, you get a guy like Patterson and, Bruce was there during some of Jake's heydays. It was a matter of giving guys second chances and hopefully they will take advantage of it. So that was the deal. And how do you have a bad match with two guys like Lawler and Jake? They couldn't they're not going to do everything they could do when they were younger, but they're still going to have a pretty damn good match, you'd think.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting match. We're going to talk about it here in a minute. Let's also mention on the way to this show, you guys run Madison Square Garden, and Chris Candido, who's wrestling here as Skip, gets hurt in a match against the Smoking Guns. On this same show, Mick Foley would finally make his Madison Square Garden debut. It's a 30-second win over Jake Roberts, but still, knowing the history of Mick Foley as a kid, hitchhiking to this arena to see Superfly jump off the top of the cage, and now he's actually one of their performers in the middle of a WWF ring in Madison Square Garden, had to be a big deal for your old pal Mick Foley.
Yeah, it was a win. We got a win there. All the way from, he's going to break your heart. You're going to see it. You're going to feel it. You're going to know it. You're experience it. But we made it to the Garden, Nick. Here you are. And I know he had that nice toothless smile was very prevalent. So it was a win. I felt good for him. I felt like this is kind of what he wanted, to make that 360 and get back in get to the Garden, not only as a fan, a hitchhiker. Sweet Hitchhiker, is that a song? I think it is.
It is now.
It is now. Sweet Hitchhiker. I think John Fogerty sang that with Creedence. In any event, it was a great day for Mick. And it wasn't like he was getting paid by the hour. At 37 second match was a way to open eyes. Oh God. Because a lot of fans were still of the belief that Jake was still a major star.
Right.
Because of his previous run. And, we can't forget how big a star Jake was there at one time in WWE. So for Jake to put Mick over in a short match like that in the Garden, it's a
big deal.
Quite the moment for Mick Foley.
Let's talk about somebody else who's going to go make their own moment. Duke Drosay is going to leave around this time to go to law school. That's not something I would have ever guessed. Did Duke have any conversations with you about where he was with his wrestling career and maybe deciding maybe this wasn't for him?
Yeah, we talked about it, and I was always honest and upfront with the guys when they would ask those questions. This may not be your destination. He's a very bright guy, and very cerebral, and understood what I was saying. That as dedicated, as hardworking as he was, sometimes talents just don't have that innate ability to connect with their audience. It's the it factor. If you have it, you're gold. If you don't have it, you're going to be something else. So anyway, Duke was a good guy. Mike was his name. I liked him, but he's here's another thing. He gets a gimmick where he's a trash man.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just some gimmicks that those guys were given, just to me, were born to fail.
Yeah.
And
I can't see, the old cliche is, could you see this guy on a WrestleMania poster in the main event? I don't know that America wanted the lovable garbage man in the world title picture.
I'm with you. He was a good 7 or 8 hole hitter.
Yeah.
In your baseball lineup, so to speak. So,
how do you navigate out of that situation though, Jim? Let's say you're a young guy and you finally got the attention of the boss and you get an opportunity to finally join the big leagues, quote unquote, the World Wrestling Federation. And you're all excited because here it is, this thing you've worked for your whole life, your dream is coming true. And they tell you, well, we want to make you a garbage man. What would your advice be in that moment?
Well, take the gig and make it your own and make it better than it sounds. That's easy for me or you to talk about right now, but that's kind of your option. This is what the owner, GM, head honcho wants. Try to make that work and add to it, contribute to the creative, make your character less one-dimensional, because like you phrased it, your friendly neighborhood garbage man probably is not going to get you on that WrestleMania poster. And by the way, it didn't.
No,
unfortunately.
It didn't. The rumor and innuendo in the newsletters at this time is that the company is thinking about running a 1 hour weekly pay-per-view on Saturday night based out of New York City. So this predates TNA by several years, but the original idea allegedly was it was going to be a weekly 1 hour pay-per-view. Of course, we know it turns out being the syndicated show Shotgun Saturday Night, but in a much different format than what the company was doing at the time. Was this the brainchild of Bruce Pritchard or Vince McMahon, or what do you remember about the early idea and concept of Shotgun Saturday Night?
I think that was Vince's idea. I think, or at least it would start there or continue from there. The weekly 1 hour pay-per-views, I never saw a long-term future in.
Right.
You're asking people to spend more money every week now. And they're in a 1 hour pay-per-views, what, booked right, maybe 3 matches. So I didn't feel like that was a hit. So when it went to Saturday night syndication, then this becomes a matter of Conrad of, you know, are we getting the right stations? Do we have enough coverage? And is this more creative for Vince to do? He was on that show. So I don't remember who all he worked with. I didn't work on that show, which didn't bother me because I didn't have to go to New York on Saturday night. But yeah, I think that it was just it was a shot. It's throwing the hook in the water, hoping you get a bite, and the fish weren't biting on that day.
Let's get to the pay-per-view. You're in the booth with Vince McMahon and Mr. Perfect for SummerSlam live in Cleveland. Were you always going to call the show? I mean, how far in advance do you know, hey, we want you on this pay-per-view? Now, that seems silly, but there was a time here where you're not exactly behind the desk for every single show. When are you notified of this, and when are you notified of who your quote unquote dance partners are going to be?
Well, I think Vince told me earlier in the week, maybe. It wasn't a big month or so away, but he'd make those decisions a little bit on the fly, and it's totally his call. He was trying to get Kurt some exposure. He knew that I was solid and I was consistent, and he could rely on me. And Kurt, was so talented. He wasn't an experienced broadcaster. So I think I was there basically to help Kurt, just and Vince, to make Vince feel more comfortable. So that's kind of how I perceive that thing, and it worked out pretty good. I worked with Vince with Lawler and the three of us, pretty good team. Thought we did pretty well. But I think earlier in the week, Conrad, I'm gonna have you work the show with me and with Perfect, and I was ready to do it. Look, that's what I came for. I came to work. I came to broadcast. So I was happy to get that assignment.
Let's mention that this is the highest gate in the state of Ohio for wrestling at the time, $413,168 here at the Gund Arena. There's 14,926 paying fans, a total of 17,000 in the building. So it's a monster success. And we've touched earlier that maybe people think that this era was not that successful for the WWF, but I think that's really only when compared to WCW ratings. But an all-time record gate here. This has to be high fives all around day of the show, right?
Yeah, I think so. But again, you got to go work. They're here. We've sold the tickets. We're going to have an ass every 18 inches, which is imperative. So now we got to go out and deliver. And that's always the next ingredient to your entree. You got to deliver the goods when it comes time to go play.
Let's jump into it. They're doing a beach party deal as part of the free for all. We've already talked about the Austin Yoko match. It only goes 1 minute and 52 seconds. But this beach party deal is another opportunity to sell those last minute pay-per-view buys when they do like a bikini deal with Sable, Marlena, and Sunny. And then of course we can't help ourselves. We've got to do some funny We have Teal Hopper discover in this above ground pool they've built here inside the arena a floating Baby Ruth. Of course, he's going to pick that up and take a bite. Teal Hopper being the resident plumber here.
Yeah.
The World Wrestling Federation.
Tony Anthony.
Yeah.
It's funny. I saw, I call matches for Cornette featuring Tony Anthony and Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And I thought he was just a hell of a heel. Old school, tough, great mindset, fearless, all those heel things that are good. He was believable. And then when I saw him become the resident plumber, as you referred to, I just shaking my head like, what have we done? He can't be taken seriously as a plumber. I mean, I get it, but so then I got to thinking, well, that's not why he's here. He's here to work with some of these younger dudes. He's a new face. He's a veteran. He's paid his dues. And on the road, when we're booking these house shows, we need these experienced guys to go out there and do 8, 10, 12 minutes with a more greener like wrestler to help them improve their game. It wasn't what we did on TV as much as what we did in the live events with those guys. And, you can't help but get better working with a TL Hopper, a Tony Anthony, or a Tracy Smothers. Although those guys are good.
Yeah.
So they were used as gimmicks on television, knowing that the ceiling for their persona was limited, but they're going to earn their money on the road. And that was just fine with them because they were getting booked on some of these houses. They were, decent, some great, some not so great, but they're getting regular paychecks and they're getting paid on time, which, it sounds like, well, that's not a big deal. That's just goes to the territory. That's just automatic. Well, it's not automatic in wrestling. We've all heard these horror stories of guys having to wait on a payday, or you go to work an indie show and you can't find the guy for your money at the end of the night, blah, blah, blah. And so these guys had none of those issues. They're on television, which they loved. They got to maximize their minutes if they cared to invest such. So I was always amazed at, I always thought that we could probably gotten more out of these cats, the Hoppers, the Tracy Smith, Freddie Joe Floyd, all these guys. I thought we could always got more out of them, but I also understood and learned the act of everybody's here for a reason, and they have Vince has a specific role in mind for them. And so, and that role is to enhance the younger guys and get an experienced hand in the ring and give those guys, quite frankly, I thought when I go back and think about it again, it was a pretty damn good deal for those guys. They're getting regular paydays. They're on television. And I would suggest to you, Conrad, that when they left WWE because of their name identity and their presence and all that stuff, that they probably didn't have a hard time getting at least indie bookings, because they were regenerated, so to speak, off our television. So, but I thought that the pool thing was a pretty good idea. When your audience is primarily male, 18 to 49, and you're trotting Sable and Marlena and Sonny out there, golly, I'm watching that. So it just goes along with the territory. So it was but it was good. I understand it. The candy bar thing was right out of what was it? What was the movie? Bill Murray did the
Caddyshack?
Might have been Caddyshack.
Yeah.
Where he took a bite of the candy bar. It looked like a turd. So excuse my language, folks.
No, turd's fine. We're not censored here. Let's jump into the show. First match is Owen Hart and Savio Vega. They go 13 minutes and 23 seconds. Meltzer gave it 2.5 stars. He says, let's fast forward to the end. With Vega out, the referee stopped the match. After the match, Justin Bradshaw and Zeb came out and called Vega a Puerto Rican dog and said they were going to send him back to the island Bradshaw would clock Vega in the aisle as he was being helped out of the ring by officials. Not a bad match, but disappointing considering the talent involved and that this was such a major card. So, a lot to unpack here. Savio Vega is a guy who helped essentially make Steve Austin here in the World Wrestling Federation. Owen Hart, arguably one of the unsung heroes of the promotion in this era.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, even though everybody knows they're phenomenal wrestlers, this one didn't seem to click, according to Meltzer. Would you agree with it? You watched it back for the first time this week in 25 years.
I think it was cold. There wasn't a story behind it.
Yeah.
You have two great talents, and Owen and Savio, two great talents. You'd either be honored to have on your roster or on any card that one might book. But it was a cold match. And so I think that was the biggest impact on it. To get 2.5 stars in Meltzer's way of evaluating or ranking, whatever, is probably a compliment to them. But, you know, you can see there too, where we try to get other guys involved. You know, Bradshaw, Dutch Mantel, Zeb came out, did their thing, got a little exposure. But I think it was just a cold match, Conrad, and there's just no build-up, no hype to it, even though you're featuring two of the best talents that we had.
Do you think part of some of the reason maybe this didn't hit is people just didn't buy Savio as a babyface? I always felt like Savio, for whatever reason, was better as a heel here in the WWF.
It might be. I think he was better suited to be a heel, so that might have had an element to evaluate, no doubt. So I think I'm with you though. I think Savio was a much better heel than a babyface. He was just so aggressive, and he had all the qualities, and he had new timing, and all that stuff was good. So it might have been the fact that people just weren't comfortable with him as a babyface yet.
Let's get to the next match. We've got the Smoking Guns retaining the WWF tag titles in a 4 corners elimination match over the New Rockers, the Godwins, and the Body Donnas. Skip is wearing a neck brace, and they're going to acknowledge his injury from Madison Square Garden. So as a result, the Body Donnas are out first in just 4 minutes when Jannetty would trip Zip and Billy pins him. And the Rockers keep screwing up and hitting the Guns. Hank finally pins Leaf after a slop drop in 7 minutes and 18 seconds. Meltzer would say the match was bad by this time and only got worse with a dead crowd. The finish was Phineas was to use the slop drop on Billy, but the referee is distracted by Sonny and Hillbilly Jim arguing at ringside. And at that point, Bart came off the top rope onto Phineas and put Billy on top for the pin. And after the match, Sonny got on the mic talking about how the Guns were what men are supposed to look like, knocking all the ugly women in the audience. And then a huge poster of Sonny comes down from the ceiling. And of course, you said on commentary that she missed a trip to the woodshed when she was younger. It got a dud rating here. Is that to do with the performers, or man, these 4 tag elimination matches are just
too convoluted?
Yeah.
Too convoluted. The tag titles were not hot. And again, another cold match. There were not weeks of angles being built up between the Rockers, the Godwins, and the Body Donnas as it relates to the Smoking Guns tag team titles. But those tag titles were not a focus. They had not been featured, shall we say. So I think that it had a lot to do with the booking. And this is a case of where, you know, Vince wanted to get work for 4 tag teams. They all earned a payday. And I think that was kind of all that match was designed to be. You hope they go out there and give you some good quality minutes. But again, the audience just didn't care.
Right.
And when the audience doesn't care, man, it's hard to convince them in that length of time. It's too late to care. You should have made them care going into the match. They're not going to care just watching this match. So I think the tag titles were cold, and the match felt very convoluted to me.
Once upon a time, people wondered who would be the breakout star of the Rockers tag team. Would it be Shawn Michaels or would it be Marty Jannetty? Of course, we know it wound up being Shawn. But I ask all of that to say, when you pair him here with Leif Cassidy, aka Al Snow, it feels like, man, these are 2 really good workers, but it's a miss. Is that to do with just the environment of the company at the time, or is it
my theory that when you put the word new in front of anything, it just doesn't work. Whether it's the new Rockers, the new Blackjacks, or the new Midnight Express, it's just not going to work, right?
All right. I'm with you on that concept. It's just it's just looked at less than. It's like junior heavyweight, whatever. It's all these monikers that are saddled on people that all it does is take them a step backwards. Hey, look, I can tell you that on good days, Marty Jannetty and Al Snow, Leif Cassidy, were a hell of a team.
Yeah.
Don't leave out Al Snow as far as being a very capable hand, no doubt. But again, the focal point was not tag team wrestling for us at that point in time, at least in the tag team division. We'd have those off, matches where you'd have a tag match of 2 stars against 2 other big stars. But, heck, Fire Conrad, it just, again, that wasn't the focus. People knew it was filler, and they reacted as such.
Let's talk about Sunny for a minute. Why do you think Sunny is constantly paired with heel tag teams here? I mean, I know she's a great heel promo, but man, it feels like she's so over with the crowd. And I know it's because she's just attractive and guys are just cheering her because she's good looking. I get that. But wouldn't it have been easier just to make her a baby face, or was she such a good interview or promo that you felt like you just had to put her with a heel?
I think that latter is what I would suggest. She was a natural heel, and she was more comfortable executing her persona as a villainess as opposed to being a babyface. So, but I think she was natural in the role. And the other thing too, we have to remember, we traveled a lot of miles since then, and having a heel female valet, there's nothing like since Sensational Sherry was getting that big push and all that exposure. But she was a wrestler. She could take great bumps. I'm not so sure that bump taking was Sunny's forte, even though she did the best she could with it. But she was just a new character, and she's filling a new role. And I think that was all a part of evolution. Just getting another one of those changes we've talked about. We're slowly making a change. We're moving away from Moolah and our girls. We're moving to the Marlenas and the Sables and the Sunnies, et cetera, of the world. So I think Sunny felt fit better as a villain, Conrad. And that's not to say that she couldn't be a baby face, but to be a baby face like a Trish Stratus or somebody, she's going to have to get in the ring and work out and spend a lot of hours training. And
I see.
And so her role was different. Her role was different than we had seen previously.
Let's talk about the next match. We got Psycho Sid and Davey Boy Smith here. They go 6 minutes and 24 seconds. You would think this would have been the Ultimate Warrior spot. As it goes, Smith's going to use his power slam on Sid, but instead of going for the pin, he was distracted because Cornette came out and is arguing with Clarence Mason. Smith goes for a second power slam, but Sid gets out of it and uses the choke slam for the pin. 1 star. Meltzer said it wasn't a good match, but better than he would think when he saw it on paper. I think Sid is probably one of my guilty pleasures as a wrestling fan. He just had a presence about him. He felt like a larger than life superstar.
Yep.
And you knew that Davey Boy Smith could work. This, for what it was, I thought was pretty good. What did you think?
I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. Pretty good. Might be a kind way of putting it. I wouldn't disagree with you on it. But yeah, the match on paper was a whole lot better than the actual match itself. Bulldog and Sid had box office. They had name identity. They both could work, especially Davey. When Davey wanted to work, he was really, really good. And so I think that, I don't know, 1 star, 2 star, I don't know. It's all subjective stuff anyway. But I thought it was okay. And, I wish it had been better.
All this gaga with Clarence Mason and Jim Cornette between the Owen Hart match and the Davey Boy Smith match feels like it's designed to just get corny away from Davey and Owen on the heels of the whole incident with Shawn. do you remember the timeline being that somebody somewhere, whether it's Corny or Vince, made the decision, maybe it's time that Cornette come off the road. He doesn't need to make all these shows. He can still contribute and be right here at the office.
Well, that would have been a result of a conversation or conversations that Cornette and Vince had about getting him off the road. And, you know, Corny still does, an innate fear of flying. It's not a joke. It's not funny. It's not, he had a system where I told the story before where we're sitting in the runway in Newark, getting ready to fly to Seattle. And John Veldostri was a guy, he's still around, works for Continental. So he upgraded us. And of course, my worst fear came true. He upgraded us for Cornette and I to sit next to each other on a frigging flight from Newark to Seattle. So Cornette's got his routine on. He's taking his medicines. He's chilling. He's going to be an amoeba sooner than later. And all the plan worked perfectly until we had, and at the time we got out to the tarmac, he was gone. I had to fight the flight attendant off of him because we're sitting in first class. He doesn't need anything. He doesn't want anything. Just let him sleep, please. And so we'll go out on the tarmac, wait our turn to take off. And I never forget this. The pilot being kind of a pissed off guy on how the things worked out. We were 17th in line for takeoff. 17th. I have no idea how long we sat there. It was a lot. I think I fell asleep too. Nonetheless, we finally take off. I think we're on the ground about an hour, maybe more, hour and a half. So somewhere over the Midwest, Corny medicine started wearing off. He's coming out of his coma.
Oh.
And it's so funny. And I use this in some of our stage shows. I was told this story about he asked me to sing to him. And I'm thinking, sing? I'm not a singer. I don't even know any of the lyrics. I know about 3 lyrics of this song and 2 or 3 lyrics of that song. So I started singing because I'd been listening to it on my iPod, a Neil Young song. And the flight attendant walking by heard me say, I heard you knocking at my cellar door. Go on, baby, can I have some more? So that's Neil Young. It's not really, it's me. So consequently, I think they thought we were gay lovers or some shit. Nothing wrong with that. That's not us. So that was the whole thing. I had to keep him occupied and singing to Cornette. It's been a great sitcom. Good episode, right? But anyway, Corny had this innate fear of flying, so we're trying to help him out a little bit and get him off the road. So it was just a tough time for him. And I think people they looked at his issues about fear of flying, Conrad, as a tongue-in-cheek thing. It's a gimmick. We can make fun of him. We can, and with Patterson around, that was always prevalent. I think that's where Bruce learned a lot of his antics. It's from Patterson and how Patterson would find things to make fun of and to have a laugh on and tell jokes about or whatever. That was just Patterson's personality. So it was a unique thing, to say the least. So I'm glad Cornette got off the road, but he helped the WWE a lot. Cornette did while he was there. He really did a good job.
Match number 4 on the show. We've got Goldust pinning Mark Marrow in 11 minutes and 1 second. The match got 2 3/4 stars. Marrow's going to debut his new finisher, which is a shooting star press here. They're going to call it the Wild Thing. Meltzer would say, however, Goldust still won the match with the curtain call. After the match, Goldust acted as if he was going to sexually molest Sable and was scaring her to death when Marrow finally got up and made the comeback and basically beat Goldust to the back. For some reason, these two didn't work as well as you'd think. Goldust's knee may have been bothering him as he didn't do all that much. I like the whole concept of Mankind coming out here in the middle of the match and chasing Sable around and calling her mommy and her freaking out. That's sort of fun for what it is.
Mommy.
It's tremendous.
Mommy.
Um,
It was sick when it was, Conrad. It might
Martin,
have been fun for some. It was sick. I'm telling you.
I kind of assumed going into this, well, after what happened to King of the Ring, Mark Marrow's going to win. Goldust gets the win. What'd you think?
Well, we had higher hopes for Goldust than we did Marrow, and Goldust took ownership of his of that crazy persona that he was given. And always say this about Dustin: he made the best out of what he was given to work with, because there was until Gorgeous George, there was no character that created a homophobic reaction. Maybe Adrian Street in the territories, but Dustin took a character that had been really wasn't a molded character, wasn't established. Somebody had already done it, and they had done it. Like I said, Gorgeous George was the first, and it's funny how you look at today's PC world we live in. That Goldust character, not unlike Gorgeous George, was built around homophobia. Not real good, but at that time it was not. It wasn't politically incorrect because it was looked at as comedy, or whatever you want to say. But Goldust was breaking through and could take bumps. He could feed a comeback. He had a unique character. The team of he and his wife at the time, Marlena, was excellent. They looked good on television. They had a great presentation. So it was all good stuff. So I think Goldust had kind of stepped ahead of the line, is how I look at it. And that would include Marrow in this situation.
It's interesting to me that we give him this new finish, a hot new move, the shooting star press, and it's not the finish. Next up, we've got Jerry Lawler and Jake Roberts, and they go 4 minutes and 7 seconds. Meltzer hated it, but man, I just disagree. I think this is tremendous old school stuff. It really starts with Lawler coming out and doing the comedy show. He's going to do one joke after another on a live mic as he makes his way to the ring. He's going to make fun of Cleveland, of course, and he's going to be wearing a Baltimore Ravens jersey. And
cheap heat, because he loved Cleveland.
Of course.
You know that he was reluctant to play that role, but what else are you going to do?
Yeah.
I'm sure it pained him, and all due respect to the Baltimore Ravens, the big rival, I guess, at that point in time, or a rival of Cleveland. But Lawler, I think, had some hesitation just internally that he's got to go out there in front of his people that he loves and embraces every chance he gets to talk about them. He loved the Indians. So, you know, he was a Cleveland guy. So he had to kind of stretch it a little bit to turn the audience against him, because they all knew that Jerry Lawler was a huge Cleveland loyalist and had been his entire life. So it wasn't a new development. But I think they did about what they could have done. I think you're right about that, Conrad. It was booked for comedy, and that's kind of what you got. You got 4 minutes and 7 seconds of a comedy presentation by and large, and then using the Jake's alleged drinking issues as a part of the storyline.
I loved the whole setup here. You know, I see why people might be offended, but you know, it is what it is. They're making quote unquote wino jokes at Jake Roberts. Of course, Jake pulls the snake out. He's going to chase Lawler with it. Eventually they start the match. Roberts is going to tease the DDT a few times, but it ends with Lawler hitting Roberts in the chest with the big bottle of Jack Daniels and getting the pin. And then after the match, he pours what is supposedly a bottle of whiskey down Roberts' throats and all over his face. And when he tries to do it a second time, Mark Henry, who had been on commentary, stops him from doing so. And that, of course, sets up Mark Henry and Jerry Lawler. So a nice way to introduce Mark Henry into the fold, make him a baby face, tell a story. And listen, I know that, you know, maybe they're not out here doing Hurricane Ranas and Tope Suicidas, but they told a story and the fans were entertained. It's old school, but I dug it.
Yeah, I didn't, you know, I'm a Lawler fan, big time. And that's why he wasn't on commentary.
Yeah.
He was wrestling, which he'd rather do anyway. He'd rather have a comedy match with Jake Roberts in 4 minutes and 7 seconds than do the commentary for the whole show.
Of course.
Still that way. He still loves to wrestle. It's amazing to me. I followed Cherry on Facebook and on Twitter, for example, and he's always got a booking. I asked him famously, when are you going to stop this shit? You're 70 something. When are you going to quit? And he said to me, with not an extra thought, when they stop booking me, I'll stop going. So that's his philosophy. And if it's making him happy and he can still out there and execute the few things that he does, the comebacks, the selling, the pulling the strap down, throwing his right hands, nobody in the business throws a better punch than Jerry Lawler. You can look back at some of those old clips on social media. You know, he's pretty amazing. And he got a lot of that from Jackie Fargo, who was noted a brawler and had a great punch and so forth. So I'm with you, Conrad. I didn't think that was I did not think it was a dud.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking for pure wrestling and wrestling 101, it may have left some lacking. But not me. I'm with you, Conrad, on this one. I was kind of entertained by it.
Yeah, I think it's just, we're both big fans of Lawler, so we're probably biased, but I dug it. The only thing that is a little, probably wish they had that back, is when Lawler's making all these jokes that are not exactly nice. The babyface Mark Henry can't help but laugh on commentary. So, but hey, it's his first outing. He's having a good time. He's probably nervous too. Next up, though, two guys who should be nervous. It's the Boiler Room match. We've talked about this a lot, but Mankind's going to beat the Undertaker in 26 minutes and 20 seconds. This was filmed ahead of time, and then they're going to play it on a screen on a series of televisions that they push out at ringside, and I'm sure on the big screen itself. But then they bring the action back into the arena,
right?
Much like they did for WrestleMania 12 with Piper and Goldust. And that's where we see the big moment, the big turn, the thing that people thought would never happen, where Paul Bearer would turn his back on the Undertaker and smash him with the urn. It's an interesting concept of a match, and still to this day, one of the more memorable matches in wrestling history. Maybe not just because of the violence that happened backstage, but specifically the Paul Bearer turn. This is got to be something that makes you grin ear to ear, knowing that you're the guy who pushed for Foley. And now not only is he working with the Undertaker on pay-per-view, but as a result of Foley being involved here and the success of the Mankind character, the whole Paul Bearer turn, that forever changed, wrestling. I mean, this shaped a lot of little kids in the crowd had only grown up with the Undertaker and Paul Bearer, and to separate them was a major, major deal.
Yeah, it was a major deal. And that was the focus of the whole match, was just how do we embellish the turn?
Yes.
And I thought we did a nice job with that because it was incredible. We needed to come off as incredulous. I can't believe what we're seeing type thing. Pulling a line from Jack Buck. I can't believe what I've just seen. And that was kind of the feeling you wanted to generate in your own verbal way. So I thought that was I don't know what ratings that Meltzer gave it. I didn't.
He didn't, and because it was taped. He doesn't give taped matches a rating, but
okay.
Still, he says no rating because much of it was taped. But Bear was great doing the turn, and both worked very hard. The only negative was that the Boiler Room stuff lasted too long and needed commentary and crowd noise. The announcers did a great job with the turn. So, do you remember in hindsight who made the call for there not to be commentary on the backstage?
Vince. Yeah, Vince. Okay. Yeah, let it ambient, let it grow, let it be natural. I thought that was a mistake.
Yeah.
If nothing else, we could have just added a little narrative here, there, and yon, some reacts.
Yeah.
So that was just me. It's not trying to get more airtime. I didn't get paid by the word. And nobody did out there. But that's what Vince wanted. He thought it would be a different touch because it's such a unique environment. The match was so unique. As I said, wrestlers are not taught to learn how to simulate a match when you're taking bumps on the concrete floor, or you're in that boiler room like environment, what you perceive a boiler room to look like. So it was just it needed a little bit of help in that respect. But I will agree with this with Meltzer. that I thought it might have been a little too long.
Yeah.
Just a little too long. And maybe adding the three voices of Hennig and McMahon and myself might have helped that a little bit as far as the TV presentation was concerned. But that's not what the boss wanted. So we gave them exactly what he booked.
The main event is why we're here. Shawn Michaels is going to pin Vader to retain the WWF title. Meltzer would say Vader has noticeably dropped weight. And Cornette does a pre-match interview. It's an excellent match. But this is one of those matches where we get lots of stops and starts. Vader presses Michaels and drops his throat over the guardrail, and the bell rings, signaling a count-out win at 13:53. Of course, Cornette's ranting and raving. He doesn't want a count-out win. He challenges Shawn to restart the match. And while it doesn't appear that Shawn ever accepted, the match was officially restarted. And at this point, Vader goes after Jose Lothario, which gives Cornette a chance to use the racket on Vader. Vader gets a near fall with a belly to belly. Eventually, after 2 minutes and 10 seconds, we get the DQ. And of course, it's because the racket was involved. But once again, Cornette's going to ask for the match to be restarted as they're doing this pull apart brawl. Gorilla Monsoon, who's the commissioner here, okays it. And finally, Shawn hits the super kick, but Vader kicks out. Then there's a ref bump. Vader hits the power bomb. And now there's no referee to count the fall. A second ref counts the fall, but of course, Shawn kicks out. Vader's climbing up for the Vader bomb, but Cornette tells him to go to the top for the moonsault. Of course, Vader misses that. Shawn climbs to the top for the moonsault body block and gets the pin at the third restart. Meltzer loved the match, gave it 4 stars. And that's not even the best part of the match or the part that people talk about. There's a spot in the match where Shawn goes up top for what most would assume would be an elbow drop, but there was some type of miscommunication. Shawn lands on his feet, kicks Vader directly in the head, and yells at him right there in the ring, "Move!" And famously, this is where Shawn got frustrated and blew his stack at Vader because the match wasn't going as planned. And I think the rumor and innuendo is Shawn had complained that Vader had been too stiff on the house shows leading up to this. And this all comes to a head, and Vader's future with the WWF has forever changed as a result of this match. What do you remember about this?
Well, nothing good. You don't lose your cool like that. Shawn had the license to lose his cool because of his influence with the office.
Yeah.
And Shawn knew that Vince was going to back him no matter what he did. And that's what happened. But Shawn overplayed his hand, in my estimation. It was very unprofessional. And he's just lucky Vader didn't beat the shit out of it, because Leon could have. Leon was hungry. Leon wanted the opportunity. Leon's, like we talked about earlier, these guys that make a lot of money, and they're touring Japan seemingly and almost endlessly. He needed an American base. And now he's in the main event of a major pay-per-view, wrestling for the biggest title that we have. So Leon had traveled a lot of miles. He had lost weight. He had showed a better commitment to what he was doing. And so I just thought it was a totally uncalled for. Shawn had the deck stacked, and because he had Vince in his back pocket. Vince has often told me, that goddamn Shawn Michaels reminds me of me when I was younger. Okay. Did you do a lot of super kicks when you were young, Vince?
Yeah, right.
But he's talking obviously about Shawn's attitude, his demeanor, that type of thing, Conrad. So it was it wasn't good. It should have, and the damn match got, as Meltzer's ratings, it got 4 stars.
A good match.
Yeah. And it could have been a 5-star match if some of that childish bullshit had not occurred.
It's a shame that it went down like this. I do want to mention that the original plan, according to the rumor and innuendo, was we were going to have this finish here and then a Survivor Series in Madison Square Garden where Vader would become the champion, and then a rematch 2 months later at the big show in San Antonio at the Dome. It'd be a homecoming of sorts for Shawn Michaels, and Shawn would be crowned champion again. And his second run of his boyhood dream would happen in his hometown. But apparently Shawn's not happy with the way this match goes. They call an audible, and instead his old pal Sid Vicious gets the nod, and Psycho Sid would become the world champion at Madison Square Garden instead. And really, it feels like Vader never got that momentum back again. Do you think, for lack of a better word, Shawn ended Vader's push?
Yeah.
It's cemented in Vince's mind. He's not ready.
Shawn explained to Vince why he didn't want to work with Leon. You know, it went from everything I remember one time, you know, I had to chew Leon's ass out because he didn't take it seriously that you got to wash your fucking gear.
Right.
You can't let your gear, sweaty gear, sit in your travel bag between bookings. You know, you're off the road, you know, so when the loop is over, you go home, you wash your stuff. And Leon had a propensity to just leave his stuff in his bag. And I had a phone conversation with him one time about that. And the bad part was, and I learned from this, he put me on the speakerphone. And I chewed his ass out with his wife listening. And she ironically agreed with everything I said. You got to take personal responsibility, Leon. You got to wash your shit. You got to wash your gear. So he comes back, and, you know, Shawn's, you know, another thing, he got in my face, so to speak, and said, I'm not going to work with him no matter if you book it or not, because he won't wash his gear and it stinks. I get all that stink all over me. It's horrible. So I sent one of the Hebners, maybe Dave Hebner, out to buy a lifetime supply of Febreze air freshener. And what I should have got was Ozium. It's an air freshener that a lot of dope smokers use. You've
heard that. Yeah.
I heard that rumor. So so all that shit was so unnecessary.
Yeah.
And you got an athletic monster heel that had universal name identity. And because one guy got his feelings hurt or he was too stiff, I'd never heard of, you know, I done a lot of due diligence on Leon when we brought him into WCW. Because I brought him in to work. I saw the match with Hansen and Leon, where Leon's eye was hanging, dangling. Yeah. And I thought, God damn, man, I can see some more of this and like it. Not to get a guy hurt, but just their organic and natural physicality had me mesmerized. So we brought them both into WCW. Then ironically, when they got there, they didn't want to work together much.
Right.
So much of that concept. But I thought Leon was a fine and a good signing for us. Had he slowed down a little bit? Yeah, he slowed down a little bit, but he had lost some weight and he was trying to get in decent shape. And sometimes when you're big like that and you're gassed a little bit, you can end up being a little stiff inadvertently.
Yeah.
You're just the way it is. So it's a finite art too. You're throwing a punch, you miss, you know, this much and it's a potato. If you miss this much again, I'm going to talk to Vince, which was, you know, that was his go-to. You know, you would think he would come to talent relations or he'd come to the agent. This match that we just talked about, Connie, the Vader Michaels match, had Pat Patterson's fingerprints all over it.
Yeah.
As you read it, I guess that's Pat's idea.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons Meltzer liked it, because Meltzer enjoyed Patterson's booking by and large, because he'd grown up watching Patterson book his own angles in San Francisco. That was one of his go-tos. Roy Shire's wrestling, and Pat Patterson as one of the stars. And anybody that studies the business knows that Patterson had a whole lot to say about his own booking. He helped, and he was good at it. So Roy Shire got a bonus there. He got a guy that was emotionally involved in his own program, would come up with new ideas for his scenarios, and it worked out real well. So it was just so unfortunate. It's just childish, unprofessional, and should never have happened. And I'm only glad that over the course of time, Shawn has changed, and he's not that, at least my knowledge, he's not that overbearing guy that was always seemingly at the center of controversy. And I'm glad that he's changed for the better, quite frankly. And of course, being drug and alcohol free doesn't hurt things. So now you're clear-headed again. You're not in a cloud around you like you would have otherwise. So, but it was just bad. Leon missed out on the title at that point in time. Sid was seen, seemingly for Shawn anyway, a less of a evil, less, and the Shawn beating a man the size of Sid would be the equivalent of him beating a guy the size of Vader.
Yeah.
It's a smaller babyface overcoming, except this time he overcame in a stadium in his hometown. So quite frankly, that made sense, that scenario. But you could have put Vader in that spot and continue to build your story as easily as not. It just didn't work out that way, and it was unfortunate.
Maybe it's unfair to ask, but how much of the heat on Vader? Let me try to rephrase it. We just said that Shawn Michaels had a big blow up with Jim Cornette. Do you think that played into any of Shawn not wanting to work with Vader? I know you mentioned, well, he didn't like his gear and he thought he could be stiff, but also too, I'm sure Shawn thought, and I fucking hate his manager. We just had this big blow up. I just want to be done with this. If I work with Sid, I don't have to worry about smelly gear or getting stiffed, and I don't ever have to work with Jim Cornette again.
It probably had a factor. I don't know how big a factor, but I'm sure it had, Corny was closely associated at that point in time with Big Van Vader.
Yeah.
Leon White. So I'm sure there was some baggage that traveled along on that journey that Shawn was going to play upon. And of course, going to Vince, having one conversation with Vince regarding his issues, Shawn's issues, was all it took. And Shawn may have had the idea to put Sid in that spot. It's not a bad idea. You can't poke holes in Sid getting that booking. Sid, like you said earlier, looked great as a champion. He looked great in the ring, had great presence. But the way it came about was totally unprofessional and unnecessary, quite frankly.
Your boy Bruce has said over the years, we didn't get the WCW Vader. We didn't get the monster Vader. That guy was gone. We got the guy who got beat by Hulk Hogan's leg drop. Do you agree with that?
Not really.
Me neither.
Not really. It's how you booked, how you brought in. We didn't do vignettes on Vader of any significance. We didn't set the table for him. I understand Bruce's point of view, and I'm not disagreeing just for the sake of disagreeing. JR disagreeing with Bruce again. That ain't it. I thought we got what we thought we were going to get, and but it didn't work out. So you got to put the blame someplace. It couldn't be the booking. Couldn't be creative, for God's sakes. It couldn't be how we presented the guy, and the fact that Leon probably didn't get the quality time in front of Vince that he should have. I think that's the case. So Leon didn't have a big fan club there, and I never did understand why. I think, he was stiff at times. He was very physical, but I never heard of him hurting people. Having a stiff match is a different ballgame than actually going out and injuring people. And I don't recall, and I might be wrong about this. Fans listeners could probably point that out better than I, but doggone, I didn't remember Vader being a guy that every time you work with him, he sent somebody to the hospital or they're off work because of the injuries due to his match. So I understand Bruce's point, but I also think that Leon was looked at differently in WCW as a talent and as a man than he was in WWE. And I can't exactly tell you why, because I don't know the answer.
Let's mention that this show only got a 29.1% thumbs up in the Wrestling Observer based on the readers' vote, 47.7% thumbs down, and 23.2% thumbs in the middle. Maybe it's just because I look back at this era with rose-colored glasses, but the combination of the free-for-all, the Mankind turn, and I enjoyed the Jake Lawler thing, and in the main event, I gave this a thumbs up, Jim.
I would give it a thumbs in the middle, Conrad, just because I appreciate the work ethic and how hard everybody worked, and some of those items you pointed out, I do agree with, quite frankly. We knew going into this thing we wanted to have a hell of a pairing and maintain and continue the story with Vader and Shawn. We wanted to have a great turn and get Paul Bearer away from Taker and put him with Mankind. That was successful. The match with Shawn and Leon was not a bad match.
No,
whatsoever. It just could have had a better. I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this that weren't even aware of some of those things in that main event. Now you can go back and watch it. You can see what we're talking about because it wasn't edited. What's on TV is what's left of that scenario is still there for the eye to see. So it might be something you want to go back and take a look at. But I would say thumbs in the middle. You know, the 14 tag didn't do it for me. Savio as a babyface didn't do it for me. But you know, it's just sometimes that's what happens. It looks better on paper than it does in the ring.
Let my family save your family some cash. You don't need perfect credit. You don't need money out of your pocket, but we will save you money. It's not a matter if, it's a matter of how much. SaveWithConrad.com. Well, and that's the case here. This only drew 157,000 buys. It's the worst drawing SummerSlam of all time. The prior year with Mabel and Diesel, they got 205,000. And what's weird about this is King of the Ring in 95 got 150,000 buys, got 197,000 buys a year later. So on the heels of that major show, you would think, oh, we're trending upwards, but this is way down. And even when you fast forward to Survivor Series 95 got 128,000 buys, 199,000 buys here for Survivor Series in 96. So for whatever reason, this didn't draw. And I'm sure a lot of people who were making a case that maybe Vader didn't belong in this spot, they hang their hat on that.
Yeah, they do. They got to make it. Everybody wants to go away from the real reasons. And I think that's the case here. Does Vader have some ownership in this matters? Absolutely.
Of course.
But so does Shawn. You know, I don't know that Shawn was the most desirable babyface. Shawn Michaels is an incredible heel. Absolutely incredible. But everybody's got to take some ownership. You know, everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon when something's great. Oh, we did this, we did that. Bottom line, it's a team effort. And I understand Bruce's point of view. I don't agree with it totally, but I can see his point of view, quite frankly. I understand what he's getting at.
Let's do a question here, and then let's wrap up this SummerSlam 1996 episode. We're going to preview what's coming next week, and we got some other stuff. Hang tight. But Brian wants to know, Jim, was there a gimmick that Al Snow would say no to?
I never heard it. Al's an old school guy, man.
Yeah.
Al was getting booked, Conrad.
Sure.
He was getting booked, and he's getting paid fairly, and he's getting paid regularly. And Al, like a lot of guys, he's like Lawler in the sense that Al had rather wrestle than any other job within the wrestling business. So I don't know. He didn't turn nothing down but the covers, as my granny would say.
We're not turning anything down either over at jrsbbq.com. Business is good. The all-purpose seasoning is back in stock. It's flying off the shelves, and it's in 2 sizes. That's jrsbbq.com. We've got a jumbo size episode next week coming up too, Jim. We've got the SmackDown series debut. Of course, I guess this is technically the 2nd episode, but this is really going to be the beginning of the end for Vince Russo in the WWF. And of course, it's all based around The Rock. It seems like it's to showcase him in late 99. So that's what we'll be doing next week. But in between now and then, Jim, I'm going to be firing up the grill about every day. Over the weekend, I smoked some ribs. I cooked a steak, and I had a tuna steak, and your seasoning came in handy every single time. I picked it up at jrsbbq.com, and you can too, right, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. I got a text from Stephen Link, who runs the website, operations guy. I think that in the short time we've had the seasoning back in stock, we sold something like 500 bottles. It's incredible.
Yeah.
People really like it there. And I love to get the feedback on Twitter or Facebook, wherever it may be, on how they use it. you know, like we've said this before, my lovely little granddaughter, she uses it on popcorn. But I use it on a lot of things. It's just wonderful. I mean, anything I put on my stovetop, if I want to cook potatoes or other vegetables, when I go back to Oklahoma and I get where I can do my grilling, it's on everything. It's nothing that doesn't work well with and enhance that flavor. And that's hard to say. That's a big statement, covers a lot of ground. So it's doing well, and business has been good. You know, people are realizing, Conrad, that getting outside and grilling is healthier. It's kind of a family gathering, or you're gathering with your buddies. I know you have a lot of your buddies that come over when you cook out, a lot of your carnivore husky friends. But it's wonderful. One of the things I enjoy doing when I am in Oklahoma and I'm out in that outdoor kitchen is being able to hang with my buddies and watch. I got a 55-inch TV out there, so I'm out there watching football.
Can't hide money.
And so, but my buddies love it. I got, you know, nice furniture out there, and I got a Coke machine that keeps all my beers and my Cokes or my soft drinks cold. It's just it's fun to be around your buddies in that environment, because guys like to shoot the shit.
Yep. Smoke
a cigar, whatever it may be, and enjoy each other's company, and then eat. Brothers got to eat, Conrad. Brothers got to eat. So I'm enjoying it. So right now business is good, and I'm really pleased when I see people saying, I ordered my products from you on Monday and they arrived on Thursday.
Hard to beat.
Yeah, it is. And so, and if we do drop the ball, we're very willing to pick the ball back up and restart the game and make sure everything's cool. So everything's good. JRsBBQ.com. It don't cost nothing to look. And we got some great packages. I still sign Under the Black Hat and Slobberknocker books, personalize those there. So that makes a great gift. So I think we're geared up. It's well stocked to go into the holiday season where we're not going to have any issues whatsoever.
We're excited to be here with you every single week. And we're excited to mention that we'll be back next week covering the debut of SmackDown as a series. By the way, if you'd like to get these shows early and ad free, feel free to join us over at adfreeshows.com. JR is doing bonus content every single month. And so is everyone else that we broadcast with, from Arn Anderson to Tony Schiavone to Kurt Angle and everybody in between, with tons of other great stuff that you can't see anywhere else, like X-Ray with Dr. Tom Pritchard. We're going to break down an old classic wrestling match and explain why the performers are doing what they're doing. You've also got our great Conversations with Conrad series. You'll hear from Jim Hurd for the first time in forever. And unfortunately, we have the final interview with David Crockett and so much more. Jimmy Crockett. Apologies. We did have David Crockett on though recently to watch an old Great American Bash with Tony Schiavone. We're Crockett crazy over at adfreeshows.com. Go check it out. And if you'd like to advertise on this show, check out advertisewithconrad.com. We'll be back next week talking all things SmackDown right here on Grillin' JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
Thank you very much, Conrad. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And I also appreciate everybody watching or listening to our studio sessions. And it's starting to find its home. And I'm getting a lot more feedback on it than I had when we first started. I think people have discovered it, found it, Conrad. And so that drops on Fridays, as you well know. You're the booker. I'm just a job guy.
Oh, whatever. Listen to you. Check it out. Studio sessions here. Jim Ross, old radio interviews from Atlanta in their entirety, only at adfreeshows.com. We'll see you next week right here on Grilling JR.
Take care of yourself, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate your business and support.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at savewithconrad.com.